Hello and welcome to Coffee with Candice. I'm your host, Candice Mama. As usual, if you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. Today, I speak to someone I admire deeply, Dr. Ramani. She has made an incredible career speaking about narcissists and narcissistic abuse. However, her scope of expertise is incredibly vast. So we're going to cover her expertise, and we're also going to cover how do we cope with this pandemic. Without further ado, here's Dr. Ram.
Oh, sorry, I should have brushed my hair better. I thought I did, but
No, you look fantastic.
it's early in the morning here.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's so nice to meet you.
Oh, so good to meet you. And I have to tell you, I mean, when I say I'm a huge fan of yours, I think I'm under-exaggerating.
Oh, you're too kind, Candice. You're too kind. Thank you so much. I mean, you're an amazing woman. When I saw that you'd requested, and first of all, you're from South Africa, which to me is, you know, who knows why people speak to our places speak to our hearts, and South Africa is that place to me. And so, and I'm honored to be affiliated with South Africa through the University of Johannesburg. And so, when I saw that, and I was like, oh, I'd be honored. So, thank you so much.
That makes me so happy.
Thank you.
Usually, people are like, "Where is it?" And I'm like, "The south of Africa." Pretty much.
Yeah, that's pretty much. But beyond that, it's an extraordinary place full of extraordinary people. So yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Ramani. But let's jump into it because you're just a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
And I just want to speak to you about all of it. But I want to actually go back a little bit and say how I discovered you. So a friend of mine had actually mentioned, I was telling them a story and they said something along the lines of, do you know what narcissism is? And I was like, of course, I'm affiliated with, like I know the story of narcissists who fell in the river. I'm like, I know all of that. And I felt like it was a term that gets thrown around so loosely.
Yes,
so
it does.
Yeah, I know what that is. And so he was like, no, go Google and just get some information. And so I started Googling, and of course, YouTube started throwing out videos. And I think I came across one of yours. And I was watching, and I remember just feeling like a light bulb in my life just went on. I thought I was living in this cave, and you were speaking about, people who attract narcissists and what it's like growing up in a narcissistic household. And I was like, oh, someone gets it. Someone gets it. And I think for me, it just became, something that I can now speak to my therapist about and speak to different people about and say, I think this is what has actually happened to me. And this is why I behave in the way I do. And so I want to start it at that point. When did narcissism become something you really wanted to teach and educate people about?
So for me personally, I really started getting interested in it in the early 2000s. Yeah, early 2000s. And it had come about actually in a very academic way. Through a long series of events, I was watching a student work with a specific group of patients in a research clinic setting, and he would be so frustrated. And I'd say, what is going on? Why are you so frustrated? And what he would describe basically was very narcissistic patients and how they were treating like the receptionists and the nurses. And the pattern was the same over and over again. I thought, wow, these patients are foolish. They're not going to get as good health care because the people are getting burned out on them. And then a few years later, I was really building up my clinical practice over and over and over again. People were coming in saying, I live with someone who doubts my reality. I'm always confused in this relationship. Nothing I do ever feels like it's enough. At the same time, I was recognizing, and I had been for years, family relationships, issues from my own culture. I'm a South Asian woman. Relationships I had been, friendships. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. It's one of those moments as an academic, you sit and say, wait. And then I started reading everything I could, and I was shocked that no one in the field was really talking about this. And that was really where it began, because I saw really lovely people suffering because the person they lived with literally was invalidating them on a daily basis. And I thought, that's terrible. That's actually abusive. And that's where it began. So that's what I've been doing it for probably about 15 years. Yeah.
Wow. And I can tell, there was also a video where you named the types of narcissists, right? I think you mentioned, not narcissists, excuse me, people who are victims to narcissists. So a
Yes, yes.
rescuer, an empath. I remember as you were describing, I was like, that's me. That's me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, is it normal? Is it normal to actually fill all of the criteria for stick magnet?
Yeah, so people know that there's a whole series I have on YouTube called, the magnets for narcissists, or narcissistic magnets, and lays out like 8 different types of people who are more vulnerable to narcissists. But like you said, Candice, you see that more than one fits. Like some people who are rescuers really draw narcissists. People who are really positive, which obviously you are, draw narcissists. And some of the patterns are the same, right? Rescuers, overly positive people. You make rationalizations for people. They don't really mean that. Everyone has potential. People can change. Not always. No, they don't. And nobody can change unless they want to. And they don't think there's anything wrong with them. So they keep treating people badly and they blame you. They say, there's no problem with me. The problem is with you. And so I have to say, for a lot of people who were very optimistic, who really did believe that they could rescue people, it would be very painful for them to be in these relationships saying, this is me. I used to be able to do all these great things for people, and now I can't help anybody. And so it's not you. It's you chose the wrong target for your help. So many people would benefit from your positivity. One thing I always say to people is, it's interesting how the narcissists draw people's attention and energy. It's as though it's something left over from childhood where people really want to win this difficult person over. Like, maybe I can win them over. Maybe I can change them with my love. It makes you feel like you're a superhero. The problem is now it's almost like putting all your resources in a bad investment. You're putting all your resources in this to the detriment of your other healthy relationships, to the detriment of your career, of your education. You're just trying to please this.
We apologize for the small technical difficulties, but we are back.
Little prayer for good measure. I was like,
okay, good. Let's hope. Let's hope. All right.
Good. Okay. So coming back into narcissists, and I love your comparison about narcissists are like slot machines, right?
Right.
Cashing in and hoping you're going to win, and it's never a win.
Right. So let me go back, because I know we got cut off when I was saying something important, which is, why can't people leave these relationships? Okay. Because a lot of people say, if this relationship is so unhealthy, even I know this relationship is unhealthy. If I saw my friend in my narcissistic relationship, I tell them to break out of it. And yet I stay in it for some reason. One of the reasons you said, Candice, is this relationship is like an addiction. Okay. I completely agree with that, right? A person's always chasing a high, that kind of thing. And they don't want to give it up. It's like any addict. The addict knows at some level the drugs are bad for them, but they think they can figure it out. But there's another reason people stay with narcissists, and it's a concept we call the trauma bond. For many people in their earliest relationships, they can associate love with invalidation. They can associate love with abuse. They can associate love with a feeling of worthlessness. So when someone comes along when you're an adult and they activate those feelings of abuse and worthlessness, instead of running away, you may equate that with love because that was the first message you got. That's called a trauma bond. And that's very hard to break because it's so primitive. A person will say they feel an almost magnetic draw to this unhealthy person. So I really wanted to make sure I made that point, because I think there's people out there who say, I'm foolish because I can't leave this narcissist. This person cheats on me. This person lies to me. This person treats me horribly. And I still keep going back, or I still kept going back. Some people are out of these relationships and saying, why did I stay so long? Some people stay for 20, 30, 40 years because they don't understand what they're dealing with. And Candice, when everybody around you is saying, maybe he's not that bad, or maybe she didn't really mean that, everyone else is enabling this person. Everyone else is gaslighting you and doubting your reality. So you literally no longer trust yourself, and you can get stuck for a very long time in these narcissistic relationships. And you're not taking care of your healthy relationships. You're putting all of yourself, like I just said a little while ago, a bad investment in this unhealthy relationship.
Oh, and so once you identify these things, right, you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm in a relationship with a narcissist, or the person with is narcissistic. A way, firstly, I'm going to ask, it's a two-part question. Is there a way of staying in a relationship and actually getting fulfillment in the long run? And two, is there a way of just leaving the relationship in a healthy way?
Right. So I will, anyone who wants more of a deeper dive into this issue, I wrote a book called Should I Stay or Should I Go? Surviving a Relationship with a Narcissist. And the reason I called it Should I Stay or Should I Go is because 50% of the time people stay in these relationships, and 50% of the times people go. And you might wonder, why would somebody stay in such an abusive relationship? Listen, here's the thing. If you have children with somebody, if you have shared money, if you rely on them financially, it's easier said than done. And especially if you live in a part of the world where if you did leave this person, you could be left with nothing. They may get to have to spend much more time with your children than you want. It can be very confusing. So some people stay. I'm going to be frank with you. If you do stay in a relationship with with a person who's narcissistic, you're going to have, it's a very unfulfilling relationship. It's almost, I always tell people, it's almost like you can't engage. You can only talk about the most superficial things. You have to be a source of narcissistic supply to them. You have to validate them to get things done. You can't tell them about the good things in your life because they'll cut you down. You can't tell them about the bad things in your life because they won't support you. So that leaves not much of a relationship left. People say, well, then what's the point? I said, I don't know what the point is. You're the one who has to stay. I mean, I'm not telling you this is going to be a fulfilling relationship, but you can actually keep it. Like, it's almost like talking to a stranger at a bus stop, right? You wouldn't have a deep conversation with them. You'd say, do you know how long it's going to be? Or how long have you been waiting? Or do you think it's going to rain this afternoon? That's about the extent of the conversation you can have with a narcissist. You can't go any deeper or they will hurt you.
Hmm. And what are some steps that people can take to rebuild themselves after a situation?
Mm-hmm. I would say when you're healing from narcissistic abuse, a couple of things need to happen. Number one, you got to find your healthy people. Okay. Like I said, when people are either from narcissistic families, when they have a narcissistic partner, they often surround themselves with lots of narcissists. It's almost like, you open the door and the flies and bugs start coming in. Lots of flies and bugs start coming in. And you almost have to keep going out and finding those healthy people. Because one thing I always say to people, some people listening to this obviously might have a narcissistic friend, but narcissistic relationships come up more when it's a parents or when it's a partner, or sometimes a boss, like a workplace, right? Those are the places we tend to see it most. Friends, interestingly, we tend to make our best choices when it comes to our friendships, and we tend to make some of our worst choices when it's our partner. And there's reasons for that, because the partner relationship is primitive and it can feel more like that abusive parent relationship, right? Friends, it's not so much. But I tell people, start surrounding yourself with healthy, validating people again. Once you recognize that you're not crazy, you're not confused, if you're in a healthy relationship, they're not supposed to be confusing, then you recognize that, okay, it's not me, number one. Number two, you've also got to fill your life with activities that are meaningful to you. Go back to school, focus on your work, start building a new idea. Another thing a narcissistic relationship does to you is it squeezes the meaning and purpose out of your life. They take all of that away. Really, your entire life with a narcissist is figuring out how to validate them, how to please them, and how to avoid an argument with them. That's your full-time job. So you start losing your professional identity. You may not be as good a parent. You won't be as good a friend. Go take back your life. And I also tell people, Candice, and this is going to sound rather mean-spirited, but I don't care. Make a list of every bad thing that narcissist did to you. Every bad thing, every lie, every time they cheated, every time they gaslighted you, every time they invalidated you, every weird thing they did on vacation. Write it all down. And I tell people to do this because people in narcissistic relationships often suffer from something called euphoric recall. You remember the relationship as better than it was. Somehow people, after 10 years of being abused in a relationship, will remember one good vacation they took. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this person insulted you 364 days a year and you had one good day, and that's what you are remembering? So I say to them, if you have this long list of all the terrible things that happened, I hate to tell you, you look at that and say, oh no, this was not good for me. And you can shut the book on that. But I also want people to make another list as part of their healing. I want you to make a list of all the things you hope to do and couldn't do because you were in the narcissistic relationship, and all the things you gave up So you can go start those things again. Did you drop out of school? Go back and start school again. Did you stop talking to your sister? Give your sister a call. Think of all the people the narcissist isolated you from and go unisolate yourself when this relationship is done.
Oof, those are also helpful to do. And one thing I want to ask is, you've touched on something about how sometimes when you are in a connection with a narcissist and you come from maybe a narcissistic household, how you can confuse it with what they call chemistry, right? Because it happens.
Yes.
And your emotions are like all over the place, and it's exciting. And usually there's a lot of love bombing involved.
Yes.
So how do people identify a healthy love after being in relationship with people who have always love bombed?
So let's talk a little bit about what love bombing is, in case people don't know what it is. Love bombing is typically, but not always, how a narcissistic relationship can begin. It is a very overwhelming, overly romantic, almost a fairy tale experience of courtship. The early part of the relationship is intense. It moves too quickly. This person seems perfect. You know why they seem perfect? Because they're studying you like a spy would study you. And they're learning every little thing about you. So they know exactly what to say to you. So you feel like you've fallen into magic. But that's because they were studying you. They also do a lot of future faking. One day we're going to, I promise down the line, I know one day they give you every promise you ever wanted. But what's interesting, they make promises for 5 years down the road, but they don't deliver on the promise they made for that evening. Somebody can't give me something in 6 hours that they said they were going to do. They sure as heck ain't going to do it in 6 years. But that's all the stuff that they do early in the relationship. And it's intense. Sometimes people move in together too quickly. They agree to marriage too quickly. They get pregnant too quickly. And now you're stuck, right? You're living with somebody, you're stuck. You've agreed to marry them, you're stuck. Maybe they'll bring you into their family system. So now you're making relationships with people in their life. So you feel beholden to them. They may isolate you from your friends and family. All of these things happen early. They happen fast. That's the love bomb. And now a lot of people feel stuck, but they're like, oh, this person understands me. They want the same future as me. And then the minute you fall for the love bombing and they have you where they want you, it's like a bug. You trap the bug under a cup, right? That's when they start devaluing you. Just when they get you where they want you, then they start devaluing you. The little insults start. The gaslighting starts. Little things, and you start rationalizing it because the love bombing was so intense and so good. And before you know it, you start entering this cycle. You go from idealization to devaluing to discarding. And maybe they'll cheat on you. Maybe you see them wanting to text with other people. Maybe they just aren't paying attention to you. Or maybe they actually do kick you out and then they pull you back in. And then they kick you out and then they pull you back in. And that's the cycle. I've known people to be stuck in this cycle for 25 years or more.
Oof, that is quite a cycle. And so bring me to the next part of the question, which is, when that is what's normal in some ways, and that's how you've been conditioned to experience love, won't healthy love scare you? Won't it feel
yes.
not exciting?
You know what it is, Candice? It's not that the healthy love would scare someone in that situation. It would feel boring. Like, oh, this isn't that exciting. I don't feel like I have a connection. When people tell me they've had a magical connection to someone, my first thought is break up. Break up. That's dangerous. If they tell me there's a soulmate, I'm like, oh my God, they're in a relationship with a narcissist. We're in trouble. These kinds of big words, magical, soulmate, never been so understood, that's terrifying to me because that's primitive talk. And primitive talk is dangerous talk. What's primitive talk? It's all those early relationships, parents, maybe people who abused you in your early life, maybe people who invalidated you, people who were cruel. They could be grandparents, they could be aunts and uncles. But those people, you're now generalizing that. That parent you could not please when you were a child, now you choose a person to be your partner you can't please, and you keep calling it a magical connection. But I can't tell you, Candice, the number of people out there I've met, they come from those narcissistic families. They meet a good person. They meet a good person who validates them, who values them, who gives them, and they go. It's a reciprocal, loving, back and forth, good relationship. And they'll say, you know what? I don't know, I don't feel a connection. It's not that exciting. And my stomach drops when I hear that. I'm like, oh my God, it's as though you can't call, it's like if without trauma, without invalidation, it's not love. And I do tell people that at some level, you've got to break that association that it has to be this rejecting relationship for it to be love. And I tell them, you almost have to white knuckle what you're calling boredom. It's not boredom. It's not activating your early trauma triggers. And so and I tell people, treat this new person like they're a friend, get to know them, practice what it feels like to feel safe. Relationships should not be a roller coaster. It feels exciting, but that's not what they're supposed to be. Healthy long-term relationships are steady. Maybe a little blip here, maybe a little blip there, but they should be steady. That's what parenting should be. That's what love should be. Absolutely not. And people who have trauma bonds, that's what they get stuck in, is that roller coaster, and they never get the love that they deserve.
Oh, wow. That just hit so many triggers in my own life. And I want to know, is there like a period you tell someone to stay alone or to stay single before engaging?
Absolutely. The way a narcissist often gets people is they get people at periods of transition. You may have had a loss, maybe a parent or a friend died. You may have just moved to a new city. You may have just started a new job. You may be recovering from an illness, but you're going through a period of transition. And when we go through periods of transition, we're more vulnerable and we're sometimes more isolated, which is the perfect time for the narcissist to get in there and do what they do without you having people around you saying, well, I don't like this guy, or I don't like this gal, like this isn't. So they really take advantage of those moments. So the last thing you want to do as you're coming out of a narcissistic relationship is get involved with someone else quickly. I tell people, give yourselves a minute, because think of how much of your life you gave over to that narcissist. You did what they wanted. You said what they wanted. You wore the clothes that they wanted. You went to the places that they wanted. You gave up the dreams you had for yourself because they felt too threatened by what you wanted to do, right? All of that. You need some time alone. And I know some people, the reason a lot of people stay in narcissistic relationships is because they're afraid of being alone. Again, that's that early trauma bond talking, right? Because the minute a person becomes comfortable with themselves, they're often less likely, it's not a full protection, but they're a little less likely to go with a narcissist, because if you're comfortable with being alone, then you meet someone and they don't treat you well, you're more likely to say, yeah, no, this isn't working for me, because you're okay with being alone. And I really tell people, I want you to live life on your own terms for a while. I want you to lie in bed eating cookies and watching movies till 3 a.m. if you want. I want you to leave the lights on, reading the book you want till 2 a.m. I want you to go out with your friends and not be watching your watch and wondering, what time do I need to be back? I want you to have that freedom and get to know yourself, fall in love with yourself, and then go meet someone, because you'll be less vulnerable to a toxic narcissist.
Oh, and so we're speaking on behalf of people who, for example, have the ability to completely cut a narcissist out. How about people who say they do leave a narcissist, but they share a child? How do you co-parent with a narcissist?
Co-parenting with a narcissist is actually like being a single parent, but having an elephant strapped to your back at the same time. It's not co-parenting. There's nothing co about it. This person is often sabotaging your parenting. They are still arguing with you. They may use the children as a weapon. You have to be ready for anything. I always tell the co-parents, you have to be this transcendent, better parent. Okay, you do. And what I mean by that is, number one, as horrible as the other parent may be, you can never, ever, ever throw the other parent under the bus, because it'll confuse your kids. You cannot insult the narcissistic parent. You can't say, oh, daddy is a narcissist or mommy is a narcissist. That's forbidden, okay? Because your kids are already confused enough dealing with this. Now, what you don't need to do is gaslight your kids. You don't have to say daddy's a hero. But when their father shows up late, or their father keeps canceling seeing them, or their father makes an argument about everything, you can check in with your child and say, hey, how are you feeling? Are you okay? And the child will say, why does daddy yell all the time? And then you can say, sweetheart, this isn't about you. Sometimes grownups, they get angry about things that have nothing to do with the people they're yelling at. I want you to know this has nothing to do with you, but please, I want you to share your feelings with me, because this feels uncomfortable. And I want you to know you can be safe talking about emotions with me. Now the kid feels safe talking about their emotions, but isn't anxious that the one parent is going to say terrible things about the other parent. That's actually very unsettling for a child, but you want to hear the child's pain. You don't want to negate their pain. You have to make sure, if you're co-parenting with a narcissist, you put everything in writing. Everything is texted. Everything is emailed for no other reason that if you keep having to interact with court systems, you've got the documentation. In the United States, we have these certain apps that the courts sometimes require so that all the communication goes to this app and it becomes a running record that is discoverable by the courts. So that's how they do it in the United States. The other thing you also want to keep in mind is that you want realistic expectations, okay? They're going to screw it up more than half the time. So you always need a plan B. You don't want to be scrambling and always saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did this again. I'm like, why can't you believe they did this again? They did it 25 times. I mean, that would be like me being shocked this morning when the sun rose in the east. I'm like, yeah, that's well, it's been going for my entire life. So I think that to have realistic expectations about who this person is. Another thing I tell people who are co-parenting, don't try to fight their ground game. Remember what they want to do. The narcissist doesn't even care that much about the kids. They care about upsetting you. So if you keep giving them a fight that they feel like they can win and they can throw you off balance because they're still mad you left them or they're still mad you're calling them out on their affair, right? They want to stick it to you. So don't give them the fight. And some people will complain. They're like, this is their custody weekend. I can't believe they're blowing off their custody weekend. Be happy they're blowing off their custody weekend because that's more time that you get with your children. And time with your children is a gift. And that's less time your kids are playing with are spending time with the narcissist. So again, documentation, realistic expectations, making sure you don't throw that person under the bus. You may want to scream, you're so angry, find a therapist to scream to, find a friend you can talk to. Don't put this stuff on social media. Don't write bad stuff because if you do, again, in the United States, that can backfire on you. And so it will be a lifelong battle. And I hate to say it, even after these kids are over 18 or whatever in South Africa, they consider that age where it's no longer custody issues. Even then, that narcissistic parent may still use them as a weapon. And I'll be frank with you, I honestly think you're lucky if this happened. If the narcissist finds somebody new and they want to go spend time with their new girlfriend or new boyfriend and they abandon you and the kids, just be glad for it because then you can give your kids a more regular structure. It gets painful, Candice, if the narcissistic parent makes more money and they're refusing to support their children. It's not an uncommon scenario. Again, documentation, realistic expectations, and yeah, they may actually walk off into the future with all their money and share none of it with you. That's radical acceptance. There may not be much you can do, but the one thing you can do for your kids is maybe make it so this is not an intergenerational cycle. Don't let your kids get caught up in the trauma bonded cycle you did. Show your kids what healthy emotion is. Show your kids what empathy is. Because again, the narcissist has no problem going off, meeting someone else and making a new family to screw up. You focus on your kids and you raise them as well as you can under these circumstances. But I want to throw one last thing in here, Candice, and it's sort of a pessimistic thing to say. If a person has a narcissistic parent, it does mess with a kid. Most kids who have a narcissistic parent go on to become anxious adults. Most. But some people who have narcissistic parents, it can be even worse. They go into adulthood and they have trouble regulating their emotions. So they may be more prone to substance use, eating disorders, acting out. They may be more prone to choosing narcissistic partners themselves. They may be more prone to not fully, reaching their potential. And I hate to say it, a group of them who have a narcissistic parent become narcissists themselves. So this is a tough legacy to carry. And I'm sure people on this live had narcissistic parents themselves. And many of them will say, this was a terrible legacy for me. I'm very anxious as an adult, or I have body image issues, or whatever it may be. It's a very lasting legacy.
Oh, thank you so much for all that advice. And I think it's something people can really use. And I know because I had a narcissistic parent. And so I know my, attachment styles, but I consider myself lucky because I, had access to a lot of resources and people. And, so I had an outlet to learn about it, to it and help. Coming out of the narcissistic conversation for a minute, we're also living in a pandemic at the moment, which is, it's unprecedented. It's something none of us have ever thought we'd experience. And so I want to speak to you a little about that. A lot of people are on what they call a corona roller coaster, which is pretty much, some days they wake up on top of the world, other days they're like, is this still happening? What is with my life? So in your practice, have you seen people who are struggling with this pandemic, and how do you advise them to move through it?
Anybody who is stuck in this pandemic having to isolate with a narcissist is in a special form of hell, because now you can't escape, right? The narcissist is in a bad mood because they can't go out. They can't go out as easily to the bar and get their validation and go to work. Some narcissists may have lost their job, so they're in a bad mood because, again, they're not getting their validation. So narcissistic people are at their worst right now. And who are they lashing out at? Their partners and their families. In fact, there's some narcissists walking out there that honestly think the pandemic is about them. I can't believe this pandemic came and wrecked everything for me. I'm like, yep, that's right. That coronavirus was all about you. It all happened to ruin your ridiculous life. And so that's one thing I'm seeing with a lot of narcissistic people. They're personalizing it. And that's what they do with everything. They personalize things for themselves. But then if they insult you, you're not supposed to take it personally, right? So it's nightmarish. Now you have people who are stressed because of coronavirus. They may have lost their jobs. They're having to educate their children at school. They're losing their money. They're worried about getting sick. They may be having to worry about other family members getting sick. You don't have your usual stress management. You may not be able to travel to see people. So many things have happened, right? So you're already stressed. But if on top of that, you have the stress of having to deal with narcissistic parents or a narcissistic partner or a narcissistic boss, it almost feels unbearable. I think we underestimate how horrific the stress of a narcissistic relationship is. Unlike some other stressors, like if you have a lot of schoolwork or a lot of work at your job, it may just be that you stay up a little later and you get it done, and then you get past the deadline. But with a narcissistic relationship, there's nothing you can do to fix it, and it never goes away. And sometimes even if you leave the relationship, it never goes away, because some people aren't fully willing to walk away from their parents, or if you're having a co-parent, you still have to interact with the narcissist on a regular basis. And so this is a stress that doesn't leave. And that on top of this massive other stress, or you're stuck inside with them. The other thing I'm hearing from people is they're very anxious about coronavirus. They don't want to get it because they have an immune compromise, or they interact with older people or something like that. And the narcissist won't do things like wear a mask or wash their hands because I don't need to follow this rule. Remember, narcissists are very entitled. And so the rules don't apply to them, and they're very hypocritical. So they won't even take the basic kinds of precautions, which makes you feel even more nervous, because now you're living with someone who's not following the rules. And because they have no empathy, they don't care if you get sick.
Oh my gosh. And so what can people do? Is there some sort of an escape, a meditation, anything that people can feel like they have some sort of control over their psyche?
Number one, you do. Realistic expectations, as disappointing as they are a way to get some mastery of the narcissist. Number two, don't feed the beast, right? What narcissists need is narcissistic supply. It's like having this giant lion living in your house and you have to constantly feed it so much food, right? You don't always have to feed the beast. I always say, listen, you could play a tiny bit of manipulation. If you need something from them, I call it narcissistic fluffing. If you validate them, you'll actually soften them up like, wow, I can't begin to tell you how lucky I feel that I get to spend time with you and that I get to learn from you because you are so amazing. You probably get them to do something. The problem is we argue with them, but when I need a narcissist to do something, I fluff them. Now, of course, all my friends think when I'm complimenting them, they're going to think I think they're a narcissist. That's not true. But I don't have that many in my life, thank God. But when I do, I'm really like, wow, we're so lucky to have your absolutely outstanding leadership. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, you're a fool, but I need something from you. And it can work with many of them. Now, you can't keep doing it because they're going to figure it out. But when you really need something, you can save it up. And so that's another way you can manage them. I tell people it's also, you've got to engage only minimally with them, but you've got to have very realistic expectations, and you've got to have radical acceptance. And here's the key piece to radical acceptance. They are not going to change. They're not going to change. And so I think so many people say, maybe if I do this, maybe they're not going to change. You might be able to get something out of them for a minute, but not in the long term. And I think what the mistake people will make is like, oh, we had a good day, so maybe tomorrow will be a good day too. No, it won't. I mean, you almost have to plan on it not being, be surprised at the good days and don't be surprised at the bad ones.
Oh, man. Dr. Ramani, has narcissism actually increased? Like, is this something that is on the rise with social media and with, Instagram culture? Or is this something that's coming more to the fore?
It absolutely is. And I think there's more than a few reasons for it. I think number one, the reason narcissists have so much power is because everybody enables them. They tell them they're great. They tell them they're cool. They tell them they're amazing. They tell them they're visionary. Think about all the people even on this call who had a narcissistic boss. And the reason that boss had all the powers, I'm like, oh, they're really cool. They're really smart. First of all, being smart and successful is not a virtue. It may be like a skill, but it doesn't make you a good person. And that's our problem. We think people who are smart and successful are good people. They might be, but they also might not be. Good people are kind, compassionate, respectful, basically the opposite of narcissism. So it is on the rise. And I have to tell you a couple of other things, not just two, but two big ones were reality TV and social media. I mean, we're using social media right now. I see the good pieces of it, but think about it. Until social media, and some people on this call are too young to know this, because I started doing this work before there was really social media. And I'll never forget the day. I remember sitting in a room. I can still see the room. And I didn't know what social media was. And my heart sank. And I thought, we're in so much trouble. Because the narcissist, this is like the perfect drug. It was like looking at the super potent form of heroin. And I'm like, oh my God, everyone's going to overdose. What are we going to do? And everyone's like, oh, Ramani, don't be ridiculous. It's a way of sharing baby pictures. And I'm like, no, this is going to be a weapon. And here we are. I mean, once upon a time, the narcissists actually had to get dressed and leave the house to get validation. Now they can sit in their home, come up with 1,000 images, keep sharing them, tell lies about their life, and get validation. And the narcissists use social media as a weapon. They use it as a way to get all their psychological needs met. They use it as a way to have arguments. They use it as a way to hide behind anonymous statuses and insult and hurt other people. They use it as a way to stalk. They use it as a way to harass. It is the ultimate weapon for the narcissist. Look at reality TV. What does reality TV do? It turns narcissists into millionaires. It gives them a platform to act like really foolish, mean people, and we tune in. And now look at also our celebration of things like billionaires, as though billionaires are good people. No, billionaires often throw a lot of people under the bus to make those billions of dollars. And we look at them as though they're heroes because they get on private jets and carry really nice handbags. To me, that's not a hero. A hero is a person who's out there doing the good work and helping people in an authentic way. All of our metrics are screwed up. And because of that, and in fact, in the 1970s, if people want more of an academic book, somebody named Christopher Lasch wrote an amazing book on narcissism. I think the best one ever written personally. And his book's a real inspiration to me. Read that book. Because in the 1970s, this dude was already talking about what was about to happen. And it was like he was Nostradamus. Like he literally predicted everything that's happened. So this is a mess. And you know what the problem is? We enable the narcissist. All of us do it, right? We don't call it out. You know the best way to call out a narcissist? Leave the room. Let's say you're at a gathering and there's some narcissistic fool in the middle of the room drawing all the attention. Everyone's like, you're so great. Say, you know what? Having a little bit of a headache. I'm going to head out. I hope you guys have a great time. Don't make a big deal about it, but don't let you be one more person validating that narcissist.
Wow. And so going forward, because I'd like to assume that everyone listening to us is someone who wants to change this culture. Mm-hmm. So how do we prevent, firstly, creating narcissists, because, many of them are created, and stop validating them. Like, we know don't like the pictures, don't engage.
Yeah.
Stop ourselves from creating narcissists, I should say?
Number one is look at where you do enable them, where you do engage them. I'm going to give you a silly example, okay? I was in a committee of a group of people. It's probably about 25 of us, most of whom I really respect. But one of them, and he came in later, was a raging, really toxic guy. It was clear to me within 3 minutes of this dude opening his mouth, okay? And so I was like, I am not engaging with this guy. I'm not. I wouldn't, I mean, and so I'd cut him off, and I happened to be the head of this group. So I really, once I started seeing him going the toxic direction, I'm like, okay, we got to get on to the next line item. You could sense him getting angrier and angrier. He didn't like the idea that I, as a woman, had the power in that room, all of that. And what was interesting was people were calling me out. They were like, you aren't being very nice. You see, that's why it's hard to be a narcissist warrior. They're like, come on, Ramani, be a team player. I said, I will not play with a toxic person. I'll skip dinner before I will do this. And they'd see me like I'd take a different taxi. I'd sit on the other side of the table. This is work. This is work. I mean, it means that you can't care so much that people think you aren't being a team player, that you're willing to set boundaries. You're willing to leave the dinner table. And also that you're not willing to be gaslighted. That the first time somebody doubts your reality tells you, I think you're being too sensitive. Maybe you're making too big a deal out of this. You know, that never happened. I never said that. The first time someone disrespects you, gaslighting me, that's like you came up to me and slapped me across the face. That does not work for me. So if you gaslight me, you say, you know what? I don't think we share that point of view. And I usually then put an end to that conversation and get out. And so we can all do this in a million small ways of not enabling these narcissists. But every time somebody gives a narcissist a second chance, we've enabled them. Every time someone says a narcissist, they didn't really mean that, we enable them. So you catch people and you tell the people you love, like, listen, they said it, they meant it. Stop making excuses. And so you can be a teacher of this too. You can tell other people. Those people who are acting badly on social media, go through your social media today, everyone. Your Instagram, your Facebook, cut out all the toxic people. Take them out. You don't need to see that negative energy. I feel guilty. It's my mom's cousin. I don't care if it's your mom's cousin. Don't enable it anymore. And, you know, some people say, I'm not ready to walk away from my parents. You don't need to walk away from your parents, but you also don't need to engage in the same way. Keep the answers simple, keep them tight, but you are no longer a 5-year-old child being insulted by your parent. You are an adult. You are a queen. You can stand strong up to this nonsense, and you don't need to put up with it. There's always a door. Walk out of it.
Oh, that is so powerful. That is so incredibly powerful. And I think when we take the power for ourselves, it stops being us being the victim to these people.
Exactly.
And okay, I can change, right? And I think narcissists tend to prey on that. They prey on all the good things about humanity, I guess. You know,
they do. They absolutely do. They take advantage of empathy. They don't have any. But it's the same reason I hate to say this. I tell people, be very careful before you forgive a narcissist. A lot of people pressure you to forgive. Oh, come on, forgive them. It's done now. You've already split up. No. You know what happens when you forgive them? They take that as permission to do the same thing again. In fact, narcissists love forgiveness. They're like, this is great. Because if I did something wrong to you, Candice, and you forgave me, I'd view that as a divine gift and remind myself never, ever, ever, always be aware, Candice forgave you, and, and treat this relationship as a friendship. Be careful, right? I'd be aware of that. Narcissist says, oh, you've forgiven me? I'm just going to do it again. So every time you forgive a narcissist, for example, for cheating, they're like, she forgave me, I'm going to do it again, and then she's going to forgive me again. They just view it as permission.
Wow. It's incredible. Do you find that in today's generation, right, in the generation that's coming up, that we're going to be breeding a lot more narcissists because of reality show culture, because of Instagram and social media? For parents out there, how do they nip it in the bud so that their kids don't go down that way?
Number one, I would say actually there's two of the most important jobs, not one, two of the most important jobs of parenting are, number one, teach your child empathy. And how do you teach your child empathy? You're empathic. You show them empathy in everything you do. You ask them about their feelings. You let your children have an emotional vocabulary, and you never shame them for it. This is particularly important for people out there who are parenting boys. Part of the reason we have so much gender-based violence, so much violence for men, is that the men were never given the opportunity to learn appropriate ways of communicating feeling, of communicating emotion. We shame men for having emotion. That's unacceptable. These little boys have emotion, and they're so often told, don't, you're a fool. And they call them terrible names for showing their emotions. So make your kids comfortable with their emotions. That means you as their parent have to be comfortable with your emotions too. The next thing is teach your child how to regulate themselves. And by that I mean, if they're disappointed, if they're frustrated, they can't just scream and yell. I often, when people say, oh, if you have a child, you're playing a game with them, do you always let them win? No. I have 2 daughters. I would sometimes win. And then sometimes they'd be mad and they want to throw the board. And I'd say, slow down, sister. I just won and that feels good for me. Now imagine if you won and I threw the board, like, can you be happy for me and celebrate me? Because someday you're going to be the winner and I want us to celebrate you. And then when they play a sport with other kids, that they learn to be happy and congratulate the other team when they win. We have to teach our children how to regulate their frustration, because that's what adult narcissists throw a tantrum when things don't go their way. I'm fine with tantrums in 4-year-olds. I'm not fine with tantrums in 40-year-olds. And that's what a narcissist is, a tantruming adult. In kids, we have to teach them to regulate, and we need to teach them to be comfortable with their feelings. If you as a parent get those 2 things done, your job as a parent was magnificent.
Oh, Dr. Ramani, I mean, I could speak to you for hours and hours and hours, and I'm pretty sure everyone could listen to you for hours and hours and
Oh,
hours.
I hope not. Oh my gosh, I think I'd put them all to sleep. So.
No, you are truly a gift. You are a personal gift to me.
Well,
And I just want to take this time to just say thank you so much for the work you do, because I know we have to wrap this up. And yeah, I just want to make sure that you understand what an incredible job you are doing in educating society, but in also educating ourselves about ourselves. So thank you.
I so appreciate that, Candice, but you know what it is though, and this is why this is actually, South Africa will be one of the countries I hope to do this in, is I actually now in the next year or so, my goal is to actually develop training programs for therapists, so more therapists and even coaches understand how to do this work. Because a lot of people say, okay, I'll go get therapy, but then their therapist doesn't understand narcissism and narcissistic abuse, and they actually get hurt a little bit by therapy. I want the professionals to get this. I'll tell you why I do this work. It angers me. I mean, it's so angry at times I can't even go to sleep at night angry. When I think of how much potential in the world has been lost to people whose voices have been silenced by the narcissists in their lives, I think of all the art that wasn't made, the songs that weren't sung, the beauty that wasn't realized, the science, the books, all of that never happened because a narcissist or narcissist told a person, you're too stupid to do that. Who the heck do you think you are? Keep your mouth shut, you loser. They keep hearing those voices. Do you know how much beauty we've lost in this world? And I've had it. I am tired of the best voices being silenced and the most foolish narcissistic voices being the ones that get the platforms. That has to stop. People like you need to be the ones holding the platforms. People who get the goodness of human beings need to get, and the narcissists are scared of us. They are scared of the truth tellers. They're scared of the people who see this. They don't like us. And because they're the ones who own everything and run everything, they try to silence us. That's why I went out on YouTube. Do you think any traditional television network is going to put me on? No. So my team said, we're going on YouTube and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to get this truth out one way or another. So that's why all of you who are truth tellers, go out and tell your truth. Because if it's not just for us, it's for the next generation. I want girls and boys out there to know they never need to let their voices be silenced.
Wow. And that is just a beautiful way to end this. And yes, when you are in South Africa, when you do start your program, please do reach out. I'd love to spread it wide, connect with people. This is important work, and I think everyone around the world needs this, because the world is really not going in a great place right now.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
So
no.
I think we need more educators, and I think we need to take it upon ourselves to become educators.
Yeah.
So more of us will be louder and less narcissists will be louder.
Yes,
So, Dr.
that's right.
Thank you again for your time. Please have an incredible day further.
Thank you. Thank you. You too. Yours is coming to an end. Mine is just beginning.
Yes, exactly. And I want everyone to know on the live, because they're like, please don't delete this. I'm like, I'm not a psychopath. I'm not going to delete this. So it will be on my Instagram.
Good.
And it's going to be a podcast. So it's all perfect. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. I hope we do this again someday, Candice. Please reach out and hopefully we'll have another conversation.
Every single thing we covered in this episode just blew my mind. There's so many tweetable moments, and as you can tell, Dr. Ramani is one in a million. I'm so honored that she took the time to share it with us and to share her expertise just so freely. She's just a phenomenal woman, and I am such a fan. So if you want to keep up with Dr. Ramani, please do follow her on Instagram under Dr. Ramani and follow her YouTube channel. The amount of insight she gives is just life-changing. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.